One Piece chapter 1069. I'm gonna say it right now, man. I was going into this thinking, man, if Rob Lucci and Luffy end up getting into it, that's gonna be like one of the biggest stretches ever. However, now that I'm actually seeing it and like you're adding in the fact that like Rob Lucci is actually fighting with this awakened devil fruit power, you kind of look at it and you go, okay, sure, upscale it, take it how you gotta do it. However, I think the one thing that kind of softens the blow on everything that you're seeing is the fact that we're getting this exposition from Dr. Vegapunk, and because you're getting all that extra information, it kind of softens the blow of the fact that Rob Lucci is fighting against someone who is clearly way above his weight class, or at least should be narratively. And it's one of those things where, because of all the information we're getting, it makes it a lot easier to digest what you're getting. And if anything, it takes your attention away from what might be potential power scaling problems. So I did think this was cool when it comes out, Oda handled this. At the end of the day, it's a problem that all long-running shonen are going to run into. You're going to have to power creep characters at some point, especially if they're older villains kind of coming back in. And I like how like Luffy, when he's looking at Rob Lucci, he's got his nickname for him. It's the same thing with another character he sees. It's like, hey, what's going on, Axe Boy? I like how we're seeing everything through Luffy's prism and we're staying in character. So the chapter itself opens up where you see more of the destruction going on and you're seeing people react to the fact that Atlas has been destroyed. You have Luffy and he realizes that Rob Lucci is there. Chopper's freaking out. Luffy immediately hands off Bonnie and says, like, go ahead and get her out of here. We're going to go ahead and handle this situation here. And one of the things we see is that Kaku is telling Rob Lucci, like, yo, we got to chill. The Straw Hats, they might be a big deal. They might be a problem. However, we can't attack them without approval from upstairs. And the reason for it is they don't want to go against one of the emperors, because if they go against one of the emperors, then it can lead into a much larger battle situation, because attacking one of those emperors is basically a declaration of war. And so because you have that information, it makes you go back to what you saw in Marineford and why Shanks showing up in the way that he did. When Shanks says stop all this fighting, they stopped all the fighting. You can kind of see exactly why, because as they say, each of the emperors, they have a fleet behind them. They have several pirates following them. And sometimes it's really hard to remember that the Straw Hats aren't just the Straw Hat crew that you see Luffy traveling around with. He's got people like Bartolomeo and others who are carrying this man's flag, and they're doing things in Luffy's name. Even if Luffy himself isn't signing off on anything, at the end of the day, they're still acting at his behest. It's almost like a mafia structure to a certain extent. Like Luffy would be the big boss, only he just happens to be someone like Gotti, and I think Castellano was one of the ones that was all the way out there in the public when he really shouldn't have. Luffy is mixing things up. Whenever he gets to an island, he's one of the first ones going into the battle and everything. There's not really a degree of separation. However, like Luffy would be the big boss, and then the rest of the Straw Hats and the main crew, they would be the made men who are capos, and then everybody else and Bartolomeo and the rest, they're just the people that are carrying out stuff. Like Bartolomeo wouldn't be a foot soldier, but you get the comparison here. So I did think that was kind of interesting to see that bit right there. And I like how when Luffy is looking over at Atlas and he sees that she's been damaged, he's telling Chopper like, hey, can't you do something to fix her up and heal her? And Chopper's like, nah, like, because she's more a robot than anything else, I can't necessarily fix her up. This will be more of Frankie's specialty. And it makes sense. At the end of the day, like, she is a clone of Vegapunk, so she is still human, but she's a cyborg. There's a lot of machinery involved in it, so it makes sense for Frankie, another person who's a cyborg, to be the one that handles this. And as Luffy and Rob Lucci are about to square up, we shift over to Navy headquarters, and you see Akainu, and he gets the information that Luffy and the Straw Hats are on Egghead, and his immediate thought is like, did Vegapunk call for the Straw Hats? And did they know that we were going to eliminate Vegapunk? Did Vegapunk himself actually suspect it? And he's immediately putting the pieces together. He's like, look, like, isn't Kizaru out there on that island? Go ahead and tell Rob Lucci to wait to engage until Kizaru gets there. And I like that this might be potentially Luffy's first time going up against Kizaru, since we saw that battle in Marineford where Luffy did try to challenge the three admirals, and you guys know, like, I was dumb enough to think that Luffy might actually win that fight. So I did think it was kind of cool that we got to see that bit thrown in there. And as Luffy and Rob Lucci are going at it in the battle, we get our first sign that Luffy has gone into his Gear 5, which that's a testament to how strong Rob Lucci is, because Luffy is shown floating through the air, and as this battle is going on, Vegapunk is like, wait a second, I don't understand. Why does Luffy have white hair? Tell me about this transformation of his. And Nami's like, look, like, I don't know what the big deal is. That's just his gum gum power. And that's where you get the big revelation that, like, there was no gum gum fruit. Like, when you go back to Wano and they talk about how, like, the Nika sun god was making the reemergence and etc., and that this is Luffy's true power, I like how Vegapunk just gives you more of the meat and potatoes of the situation. He's like, look, there's never in any of the Devil Fruit books ever been a gum gum fruit. And Usopp's like, well, that can't be right, because like Luffy's a rubber man. He's always saying gum gum this, gum gum that, gum gum you, gum gum me. And what I like here is that Vegapunk is watching everything. He's like, he looks just like one of the gods that was in one of the older texts. And when Sanji hears this, it's like, look, Luffy's no god. Like, Luffy's a freaking idiot. And even Nami says, like, I've never heard of Nika the sun god. What are you talking about? And we get this information as Luffy and Rob Lucci are battling, and Luffy's going into those Toon Force powers and is just doing all the goofy stuff he did against Kaido. We find out that basically all things are brought into World with Hope, even devil fruits, and he's explained it like this: like, anytime people are saying, I wish I could do this or I wish I could do that, if only I could be like this, that's how devil fruits came into existence. And you know, like, you got Nico Robin on there where it's talking about the unnatural status as loathed by Mother Sea. Obviously talking about the fact that, like, when you have the devil fruits, you can't actually swim anymore. And what I like about that is that Nico Robin's a great example of this, because how many times have you ever heard someone say, I wish I had more hands? There's just not enough hands to get a job done. Nico Robin can make a bunch of hands. Nico Robin can spawn off like 9 million hands. So I thought that that was cool to kind of see that and have Robin right there on the situation. And what I like here is that Vegapunk is like, this is only just my theory. However, at the same time, it's not really a theory as well. And as this battle is going on, Sentomaru shows up and Luffy's like, oh, okay, that's Axe Guy right there. And just the disrespect, because like Luffy didn't even recognize the dude's name. However, we also see as the clones of the 7 warlords have begun to start assembling, and Vegapunk is ordering like, yo, you got to defend us. You got to take down CP0. And Kaku and them like, oh crap, like, we got the authority chips, but we're not going to be able to do anything. And we find out that they can't control S-Hawk or S-Shark, S-Snake, simply for the fact that there's a hierarchy to using the pacifists. So essentially the 5 elders, they're the ones on top, and then you got Dr. Vegapunk and all of his clones. Then you got Sentomaru, and then you got the authority chip owners. So that'll be people like CP0. And so essentially they're screwed at this point. And as Luffy and Rob Lucci begins to ramp up, Luffy sees Sentomaru, and you have this moment where like Luffy kind of makes fun of him for a second, but before things can ramp up, Rob Lucci ends up showing up with the hand pistol, and Luffy gets super pissed off because Sentomaru's been taken down, and Rob Lucci's like, yo, this fight's continuing right here. So I thought that this was kind of cool that Oda raised the stakes in the way that he did here. But I am going to be curious though, now that we know that there's a hierarchy, what's going to happen with those warlords, those clones of the warlords, especially now that people like Jinbe actually know the truth? That's actually going to be my chapter question, you guys. But so always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Have an awesome day, guys.